Most of us are familiar with the story of the great epic Mahabharata. Vyasa is perhaps the greatest sage in the history of Hindu religion. He edited the four Vedas, wrote the 18 Puranas, the epic Mahabharata, and the Srimad Bhagavad Gita. He even taught Dattatreya, who is regarded as the Guru of Gurus. Satyavati was the mother of Vyasa Maharshi. Mahabharata is full of fascinating stories. The birth of Satyavati is a weirdly fascinating story. There once lived a king called Uparichara, Vasu, and he was also called as the king of Chedi dynasty. He enjoyed his time out hunting in the forest. And during one such expedition, he was tired and due to this decided to rest for a while under a tree. While resting under a tree, he thought about his wife and ejaculated. Not wanting to waste his sperm, he packed them in a leaf and asked a bird to deliver the wrapped up leaf to his wife. On his way, the bird was attacked by a falcon and the semen dropped in the river Yamuna. A fish ate it. This fish was an apsara called Adrika. During olden times, it is known that at night time, Apsaras used to come to Yamuna river and enjoyed their time there. Humans avoided going to Yamuna at this hour because of the Apsaras, as they didn't want any humans' presence and they wanted complete privacy. Apparently, an old Brahmin who forgot this rule went to Yamuna to finish his evening rituals and prayers in the river. Adrika was there enjoying her serene time alone. She did not like the presence of a human. She wanted to trick the Brahmin. So she swam under the water and pulled his leg. He instantly knew it was an apsara and cursed her to become a fish and stay in Yamuna. Since then, she's been staying in Yamuna in the form of a fish. Coming back to the story of Satyavati, the semen that were dropped by the bird were consumed by Adrika and she had twins. Soon, a fisherman caught the pregnant fish and cut it open. He found two babies in the womb of the fish, one male and one female. The fisherman, surprised by this, presented the babies to the king. The king kept the male child, and the boy grew up to be the king of Matsya, the founder of the Matsya kingdom. The king gave the female child back to the fisherman, naming her Matsyagandha, the one who smells like fish. The fisherman raised the girl as his own daughter and named her Kali, the dark one, because of her complexion. Over the course of time, Kali earned the name of Satyavati. The fisherman was also a ferryman, ferrying people across the river in his boat. Satyavati helped her father, the fisherman, in his job and grew up into a beautiful maiden. The Devi Bhagavata Purana narrates that when Kali was ferrying the rishi sage Parashara across the river Yamuna, the sage was taken by her humble heart and desired to have her. Out of his lust, he held her hand. She tried to dissuade Parashara, saying that a learned Brahmin of his stature should not desire a woman who stinks of fish. She realized the desperation and persistence of the sage, and fearing that if she did not hear to his request, he might curse her in rage. So Kali agreed and told Parashara to be patient until the boat reached the banks. On this pretext, she started thinking a way out of the situation in the meanwhile. On reaching the other side, the sage grabbed her again, but she declared that her body stank of fish and they both would be displeased with the stink. The sage, out of his desperation, chanted some powerful mantras and the Matsyagandha was transformed into Yoganagandha, she whose fragrance can be smelled from across a mile. And as she now smelled of musk and so was called Kasturi Gandhi. When Parashara, tormented with desire, approached her again, she insisted that the act was not appropriate in broad daylight, as her father and others would see them from the other bank, and they should wait till night. The sage, with his powers, shrouded the entire area with a fog. Before Parashara could make his move again, Satyavati interrupted him and said that he would enjoy her and depart, robbing her of her virginity and leaving her shamed in the society. The sage then blessed her with virginity and promised that her courtiers would be a secret and her virginity intact. The son, born from their union, would be as famous as the greatest sage, and her fragrance and youth would be eternal. Parashara granted her these wishes and was satiated by the beautiful Satyavati. After the act, the sage bathed in the river and left, never to meet her again. Ecstatic with her blessings, Satyavati soon gave birth to a baby boy on an island in Yamuna. The son grew up as a youth and promised his mother that he would come to her aid every time she called on him. He then left to do penance in the forest. This was none other than Vyasa. The legendary Veda Vyasa's birth was hence through Satyavati and a sage. Shantanu, the king of Hastinapura, came to the forest on a hunting trip one day and was mesmerized by the musk fragrance emanating from Satyavati. Shantanu, the Kuru king of Hastinapura, came to the forest on a hunting trip one day and was mesmerized by the musk fragrance emanating from Satyavati. Allured by her sweet scent, Shantanu reached Satyavati's house and seeing her fell in love with her instantly. The king asked the fisherman chief for his daughter's hand. The fisherman Dashraj said his daughter would marry the king if and only if her sons would inherit the throne. The king, shocked and dejected, returned to the palace since he had already appointed his son Devavrata, who was mothered by goddess Ganga, as a heir apparently. Devavrata was distressed by his father's condition. He learned about the promise asked by the fisherman chief from a minister. Immediately, Devavrata rushed to the hut of the fisherman chief and begged for Satyavati's hand on his father's behalf. The fisherman repeated his condition and told Devavrata that only Shantanu was worthy of Satyavati and he has been rejected of the marriage proposal from even the Brahmanis like Astita. Devavrata renounced his claim to the throne in favor of Satyavati's son, but the fisherman contended that Devavrata's children in the future might dispute his grandson's claim of the throne. Intensely, Devavrata pledged the terrible vow of brahmacharya, celibacy. The fisherman immediately gave Satyavati to Devavrata, who was henceforth called as Bhishma. Bhishma presented Satyavati to Shantanu, and they both happily got married. Satyavati's premarital firstborn, Vyasa, laments that his mother abandoned him to fate immediately after birth. He returns to his birthplace in search of his mother. Then he finds out that she was now the queen of Hastinapura. After their marriage, Satyavati gave birth to two sons, Chitrangada and Vichitravarya. The Harivamsham tells of Bhishma recalling events after Shantanu's death. During the period of mourning after Shantanu's death, Ugrayudha Paurava demanded that Bhishma hand over Satyavati in return for wealth. Bhishma killed Ugrayudha Paurava, who had lost his powers because he lusted after another's wife. However, the Mahabharata does not include this event. It only describes Bhishma crowning Chitrangada as king under Satyavati's command. Chitrangada was later killed by Gandharva. After Chitrangada's death, his brother Vichitravarya was crowned king, while Bhishma ruled on his behalf until Vichitravarya grew up. When Vichitravarya came of age, he was married to princes of Kashi, Kosla. The princesses were Ambika and Ambalika. Bhishma won both of them in a Swayamvara for his brother Vichitravarya. The childless Vichitravarya met with an untimely death. Now, with no heir to the throne, Satyavati asked Bhishma to marry the widows of Vichitravarya, following the practice of niyoga, which was common during those days. Bhishma, however, refused, reminding Satyavati of the promise he made to his father and his vow of bachelorhood. He suggested that a Brahmin could be hired to father children on the widows, thus preserving the dynasty. Revealing to Bhishma the tale of her encounter with Parashara, Satyavati well knew that this was the time to call her son Vyasa to aid her. Satyavati coaxed Vyasa to have niyoga with his brother's widows, saying, "From affection for thy brother Vichitravarya, for the perpetuation of our dynasty, For the sake of this Brahmani's request and my command, and finally, you are my son, you owe it to me. Saying these words, she tried to convince him. After convincing Vyasa, Satyavati managed to obtain the consent of her virtuous daughter-in-laws, Ambika and Ambalika. Though Vyasa initially argued that Vichitravarya's wives were like his daughters, having niyoga with them was a heinous sin, through which no good could come, the hunger for grandsons made Satyavati resort to any solutions. Vyasa finally agreed to that disgusting task, but suggested that offsprings of perversity cannot be a source of joy. Satyavati invited Vyasa to Ambika's bedchamber. However, during the act with Vyasa, Ambika noticed his dark appearance and closed her eyes. Vyasa was enraged and declared to Satyavati that due to Ambika's cruelty, her son would be blind. She then conceived, and as predicted, a son was born who was blind. She named him Dhritarashtra. And in his lifetime, he had 100 sons, later known as the Kauravas, descendants of the Kuru. Satyavati considered such a hire to be an unworthy king, so she asked Vyasa to have niyoga with her other daughter-in-law. During their niyoga, Ambalika fell pale due to Vyasa's grim appearance. As a result, the child would be born, Vyasa told his mother, who begged for another child. In due course, the blind Dhritarashtra and the pale Pandu were born. Satyavati again invited Vyasa to Ambika's bedchambers. She remembered Vyasa's grim appearance and repulsive odor, and substituted a Shudra, a lower caste maid, in her palace. The maid respected the sage and was not afraid of him, and Vyasa thus blessed her a son. The son who would be the most intelligent man, and she would no longer be a slave because of this boon. Vyasa told Satyavati of the deception and then disappeared. Vidura, an incarnation of God Dharma, was born to the maid. Satyavati was grief-stricken because of her grandson's untimely death and did not wish to live any longer. After the funerary rites for Pandu were done, Vyasa warned Satyavati that happiness would end in the dynasty and devastating events would occur in the future, which she would not be able to bear in her old age. At Vyasa's suggestion, Satyavati left for the forest to do penance with her daughter-in-laws Ambika and Ambalika. In the forest, she died and attained heaven. Within some days, her daughter-in-laws too died. Satyavati's story teaches the new generation women that determination and commitment are different from avarice and calculation. One should know where greed takes over from ambition. In a nutshell, the central plot of the Mahabharata revolves around the legitimacy of the succession rights to the kingdom of Kurukshetra. The kingdom was the ancestral realm of King Bharata, from whom the epic derived the name Bharata. The last king whose succession was enclouded was Shantanu. He sired 3 sons. The first, Devavrata, born to river goddess Ganga, was the legitimate heir. King Shantanu's subsequent infatuation with the low-class girl Satyavati resulted in 2 younger sons, Chitrangada and Vichitravarya. Complications arose with this second alliance because Satyavati's father drove a hard bargain for the alliance by demanding that Prince Devavrata shall promise to stand aside and allow Satyavati's sons to inherit the throne. Not only that, the heir to the throne was also asked to promise that he will not have any sons that could rival the throne. By making both these promises, Devavrata earned the title of Bhishma. By a strange twist of fate, the succession rights are complicated when the eldest of King Pandu's son, Yudhishthira, was born moments ahead of the senior Dhritarashtra's son, Duryodhana. This situation eventually led to the great war between the cousins, and the sons of Pandu prevailed. This core of the story grew over a period of time, telling and retelling until it stabilized at about 100,000 stanzas and assumed the name the Mahabharata, or the great story of the Bharata dynasty.